Have you ever said something in anger and wished you could take it back seconds later? Or promised yourself you'd change tomorrow, only to fall into the same habits again? If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Most people don't lose control of their lives all at once. They lose it in small moments they barely notice. A moment of anger, a moment of distraction, a moment where comfort feels easier than discipline. And over time, those small impulses quietly begin shaping the direction of a life. But what if the real problem isn't a lack of opportunity, or talent, or even motivation? What if the real problem is something much smaller and much closer? A single moment between impulse and action. In this story, you'll meet a man whose life was falling apart. Broken relationships, financial problems, lost opportunities. Everything seemed to be slipping through his hands, until he discovered one surprisingly simple habit. A habit so small most people ignore it completely. Yet that one habit slowly transformed his decisions, his discipline, and eventually his entire life. By the end of this video, you may discover that the power to change your future is not hidden in some complex strategy. It might be hiding in the next decision you make. Most people don't lose their future in one dramatic moment. It slips away in tiny decisions. The extra hour of distraction, the angry reaction, the easy choice that feels good now but quietly steals tomorrow. At first, it barely feels like a problem. Life just moves along, one impulse at a time. But slowly, those impulses begin to shape everything. A man might promise himself he'll change tomorrow. He'll wake up early, start fresh, finally take control. Yet when morning arrives, comfort whispers louder than commitment. 5 more minutes turns into an hour. And just like that, another day slips through his fingers. You see it everywhere. Someone lashes out in anger and damages a relationship that once meant everything. Another gives in to temptation and destroys months of hard work. A small decision made in a moment of emotion, and suddenly the future bends in a direction they never intended. The strange thing is that most people know exactly what they should do. They know they shouldn't react with anger. They know they shouldn't waste their time on things that lead nowhere. But knowing and doing, well, those are two very different battles. And the battlefield often lives inside their own mind. Impulses are powerful because they feel urgent. They demand attention right now. Pleasure, comfort, revenge, distraction. They all whisper the same message. Just this once. But just this once has a way of repeating itself. Over time, these small moments stack up like invisible bricks. One choice leads to another, then another. And before long, a person looks around and wonders how life became so unstable. How did everything drift so far from what they once imagined? What makes it harder is that the damage rarely appears immediately. Bad habits don't destroy life overnight. They slowly erode it, like water carving a canyon through stone. Day after day, decision after decision, until suddenly the consequences become impossible to ignore. And somewhere out there, there's a man who feels the weight of all those decisions pressing down on his life. A man who once believed things would work out somehow. But now, things are beginning to fall apart. And whether he realizes it yet or not, his greatest battle is about to begin. There was a time when he believed life would eventually figure itself out. Not perfectly, not easily, but somehow things would fall into place. He worked when he had to, rested when he could, and chased whatever felt good in the moment. For a while, it didn't seem like a problem. But slowly the cracks in his life began to widen. His finances were the first warning. Money came in and disappeared just as quickly. Small purchases, impulsive decisions, promises to fix it next month. He never meant to create chaos in his life, but intention alone rarely controls reality. Then came the relationships, arguments that started over nothing, words spoken in anger that he wished he could take back. People who once stood close to him began stepping away, not all at once, but enough for him to feel it. Some nights he sat alone, replaying those moments in his head. He knew he wasn't a bad man. Deep down, he cared about people. He had dreams once, real dreams. But somehow those dreams felt like they belonged to another version of him. The truth was harder to admit. He often acted before thinking, reacted before understanding, chose what felt easiest instead of what was right. And each decision quietly pushed his life further off course. At work, things weren't much better. Opportunities came, but they slipped away. Sometimes he arrived late. Sometimes he lost his temper. Sometimes he simply lacked the discipline to follow through. People began to notice, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the subtle ways that say everything. A shorter conversation, a missed opportunity, a door that quietly closed. Inside, frustration started to grow. He wanted things to change. He truly did. But every time he tried to turn things around, something inside him pulled him back to the same patterns, the same reactions, the same mistakes. And slowly, a frightening thought began to form in his mind. What if the real problem wasn't the world around him? What if it wasn't bad luck or unfair circumstances? What if the real problem was him? And that realization would soon push him into a moment he could no longer ignore. Morning usually arrived the same way for him. The alarm rang, and for a brief second there was hope. Today could be different. Today he could finally get things together. But then the familiar heaviness settled in, and the day began exactly like the ones before it. He rushed through his routine without much thought. Coffee in one hand, worries in the other. Plans filled his mind. Start saving money, control his temper, focus on work. Yet by midday, those plans were already fading. Old habits had a way of reclaiming the steering wheel. It wasn't that he lacked intelligence. He understood what needed to change. He had watched enough mistakes unfold to see the pattern clearly. But understanding the map doesn't mean you have the strength to walk the road. And every step forward seemed to collapse beneath him. Sometimes it was anger. A small comment from someone would ignite something inside him. Before he even realized it, the words were already out. Sharp, impulsive, impossible to take back. And afterward came the familiar silence of regret. Other times it was distraction. Instead of doing the work that could move his life forward, he drifted toward whatever felt easier in the moment. Scrolling, wasting time, telling himself he'd start tomorrow. Tomorrow became his most repeated promise. Evenings were the hardest. That was when the noise of the day faded, and with it came the quiet truth he tried to avoid. He could see the gap between the man he was and the man he once believed he could become. The frustration built slowly, not explosive, but heavy, like carrying a weight that grew larger every week. He wanted to change his direction, desperately, but something inside him kept pulling him back. It began to feel like he was watching his own life from the outside, seeing the mistakes happen, almost in slow motion, knowing the better choice, yet failing to take it. And somewhere deep inside, a painful question started to grow. How long could a man live like this before everything finally collapsed? That question would soon find its answer. Every life drifting off course eventually reaches a moment of collision. Not always loud, not always dramatic, but unmistakable. The kind of moment that forces a man to stop pretending everything is fine. For him, it arrived on a day that began like any other. Same rushed morning, same tired thoughts running through his mind, same quiet promise that today would somehow be different. But life had other plans waiting. At work, an opportunity appeared, the kind that could change things. A chance to prove himself, a chance to earn trust again. For a brief moment, hope flickered. Maybe this was the moment everything could turn around. But pressure has a way of exposing what lives inside a man. A small problem appeared, then another. Stress began to rise like a storm gathering in the distance, and before he realized it, the old pattern took over. His reaction was quick, too quick. Words spoken with frustration, decisions made without thinking. The room fell silent in the kind of way that tells you something has just gone terribly wrong. You know that moment when you wish you could rewind time, when you realize instantly that you've crossed a line you can't uncross. That's exactly where he found himself standing, watching the consequences unfold in front of him, and knowing he had caused them. The opportunity disappeared just as quickly as it came. Trust faded from the faces around him. The door that might have opened a new chapter quietly closed, and suddenly, the weight of his choices became impossible to ignore. This wasn't bad luck anymore. Later that night, sitting alone, the truth finally broke through. Not gently, not kindly, but clearly. The greatest obstacle in his life wasn't the world around him. It was the man staring back at him in the mirror, and that realization would force him to make a decision he had avoided for years. That night felt different from the others, not because the room had changed, but because something inside him had. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't blaming circumstances. He wasn't blaming other people. He was staring directly at the truth. He sat quietly, replaying the day in his mind, the lost opportunity, the reactions he couldn't undo, the familiar chain of impulsive decisions that had led him there again. And slowly, something uncomfortable began turning into something powerful. A realization. He had always thought his life was falling apart because of bad luck, because of difficult people, because the world was somehow working against him. But now the pattern was impossible to ignore. His reactions were shaping his reality. It wasn't one big mistake that had brought him here. It was thousands of small moments. Moments where he chose comfort over discipline, emotion over reflection, impulse over intention, and suddenly a quiet question appeared in his mind. What if the problem wasn't his life, but his lack of control over himself? The thought felt uncomfortable at first, almost humiliating, but hidden inside that discomfort was something he hadn't felt in a long time. A strange sense of possibility, because if his impulses had created the chaos, then maybe control could create something better. That idea stayed with him as the night grew quiet, not as a loud promise, not as a dramatic declaration, but as a simple, powerful decision forming in his mind. If he truly wanted to change his life, he would first have to learn how to control the man making the decisions. And somewhere out there, the answer to that challenge was already waiting for him. Many of the stories you hear here aren't just stories. They reflect the invisible weight you may be carrying every day. If you're tired of holding pain, responsibility, and guilt that were never yours, I created an ebook called The Weight of Stones That Are Not Yours and More Too Bonus for you. It's for those who want to let go, set boundaries, and live with more lightness. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. Change rarely begins with a loud revelation. More often, it arrives quietly, almost unnoticed. A sentence in a book, a piece of advice from someone wiser, or a simple idea that suddenly makes everything clearer. For him, it happened on an ordinary afternoon. Nothing dramatic, nothing life-altering at first glance. Just a conversation with someone who had lived long enough to understand a few hard truths about life. The kind of person who speaks calmly, but whose words stay with you. And one sentence changed the way he saw himself. The man looked at him and said something simple. Your life will always move in the direction of your strongest impulse, unless you learn to pause. At first the words sounded almost too simple. Pause? That was the solution? But the more he thought about it, the deeper it felt. Most people never pause. They react. They answer anger with anger. They answer stress with frustration. They answer boredom with distraction. And without realizing it, they let their impulses run their lives. But the mentor explained something powerful. Between every stimulus and every reaction, there is a small space. A quiet moment most people rush past without noticing. And inside that tiny space lives one of the greatest powers a person can develop, the ability to choose. That idea stayed in his mind for days. At first it felt strange, almost unnatural, but slowly he began to notice how often his life had been controlled by automatic reactions, as if his impulses had been driving the car the entire time. The mentor had also shared something practical. Before you react, take one breath, he had said. Just one. Not 10 minutes of meditation, not a complicated system. Just one conscious pause before you act. It sounded almost too small to matter. But sometimes the smallest habits reshape the direction of a life. And that simple idea, pause before reacting, was about to become the first tool in his transformation. Though he had no idea yet how difficult that simple habit would be to master. At first, the idea sounded almost too simple to change anything. Pause before reacting. Just one breath before every decision. It didn't look like a grand strategy, but sometimes the most powerful systems hide inside small actions. So he decided to test it. Not tomorrow, not next week, right away. He would start noticing every moment when his emotions tried to take control. The first opportunity came sooner than expected. A frustrating comment from a coworker. Normally he would respond instantly, sharp and defensive. But this time, something different happened. He remembered the pause. Just one breath. That was the rule. He inhaled slowly, feeling the tension in his chest. For the first time, he didn't react automatically. He chose his response, and the moment passed without the explosion that would have followed before. That small victory might not have meant much to anyone else, but to him, it felt like discovering a hidden lever inside his own mind, a place where he could interrupt the chain of impulse, a place where he could choose a different path. From that day forward, he turned the pause into a daily practice. Before answering criticism, before spending money, before giving in to distraction, he would stop, breathe, and ask one simple question. Will this decision help my future, or only satisfy this moment? Some days he succeeded. Other days he slipped back into old habits. But the system itself remained simple enough to try again every time. Pause, breathe, choose, and slowly, something surprising began to happen. The space between impulse and action started growing larger. His awareness became sharper. His reactions became slower and more deliberate. Yet the real battle had only just begun, because breaking old habits isn't easy, and the next few days would test his discipline in ways he never expected. The first few days felt like stepping into a quiet war, not against the world, but against himself. Every situation seemed to trigger the old reactions he had lived with for years. Anger rose quickly. Distraction called his name louder than ever. It was almost strange how strong those impulses felt. As if the moment he tried to control them, they pushed back harder. A rude comment, a stressful problem at work. Even boredom became a test of discipline. More than once he caught himself reacting the old way, the sharp words escaping before he paused, the wasted hours disappearing into meaningless distractions. Those moments hit him with frustration. Had anything really changed? But something was different now. Before, he barely noticed his impulses. Now he could see them forming in real time, like watching a storm gather on the horizon. And awareness, even painful awareness, was a powerful beginning. One evening he almost gave up. A long day, a short temper, and another mistake he wished he could erase. He sat there thinking maybe people like him just didn't change. Maybe discipline belonged to other kinds of people stronger than him. But then he remembered something the mentor had said. Self-control isn't built in perfect moments. It's built in the moments when you fail and choose to try again. Those words echoed in his mind, and something inside him steadied. So the next day he tried again, and the day after that. Sometimes the pause came too late. Sometimes it arrived just in time to stop a mistake. But slowly, he was learning to interrupt the old patterns. The battles were still constant, but they were no longer invisible. He could feel himself fighting for control over his own actions, and even the smallest victories started to feel meaningful. Because when a man wins control over one moment, he begins to believe he might someday control his future, and in the weeks ahead, something unexpected would start to appear. The first signs that his life was actually beginning to change. At first the changes were so small they almost went unnoticed. No dramatic transformation, no sudden breakthrough, just quiet moments where he chose differently than he once would have. And those moments began stacking up. One morning, someone criticized his work. The old version of him would have reacted instantly, defensive, frustrated, ready to argue. But now, something subtle happened inside him. He paused, breathed, and listened instead. It surprised even him. The tension that once ruled his reactions didn't explode the way it used to. Instead, he found himself thinking before speaking, choosing words more carefully, and the conversation ended without conflict. That single moment didn't change his life overnight, but it changed something inside his confidence. For the first time, he realized he wasn't a prisoner of his impulses. He had a choice, and that realization was powerful. Over the next few weeks, these small victories multiplied. He began controlling his spending instead of acting on impulse. When anger surfaced, he gave himself space before reacting. When distraction appeared, he asked himself what truly mattered. Little by little, discipline started replacing chaos. It wasn't easy. Some days still felt like climbing a steep hill. Old habits whispered constantly, tempting him back into familiar patterns. But now he had a tool, the pause. And that tool gave him a moment to choose. People around him started noticing subtle differences. His responses felt calmer. His decisions felt more thoughtful. The same man was standing there, yet something about him felt steadier. Even his own thoughts began to change. Instead of feeling controlled by life, he felt more in control of himself. That quiet shift brought something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of stability, a sense that progress was possible. Still, the most important test had yet to come. Because change isn't proven in ordinary moments. It reveals itself in the moments that once caused the greatest damage. And soon, a situation would appear that would test everything he had learned. A moment where one decision could open a door he once believed was permanently closed. Life has a curious way of testing people the moment they start changing, almost as if the old patterns want one final chance to pull them back. And one afternoon, that test arrived without warning. A situation that once would have triggered his worst reactions. The kind of moment that used to derail everything. It began with pressure. A problem at work that needed a quick solution. Tension filled the room as people argued about what went wrong. Voices grew louder. Blame started moving from one person to another. In the past, this was exactly where he would lose control. A sharp comment would spark his anger. His reaction would escalate the conflict, and before long, another opportunity would slip through his hands. But this time, something different happened. He felt the impulse rising inside him, that familiar heat of frustration climbing quickly. But now he recognized the signal. Instead of reacting immediately, he paused. One breath, just enough space to think. In that small moment of control, everything changed. He listened instead of interrupting. He spoke calmly instead of defensively. And instead of adding fuel to the conflict, he offered a solution. The room grew quieter. People turned toward him. It wasn't a dramatic speech, just a simple suggestion delivered with clarity and composure. But the shift in energy was undeniable. The problem began moving toward resolution instead of chaos. And suddenly, something surprising happened. Respect. For the first time in a long while, people saw him differently. Not as the man who reacted impulsively. Not as the man who created problems. But as someone steady in a stressful moment. That single decision, one controlled reaction, opened a door that had been closed to him before. And as he walked away from that moment, something powerful settled in his mind. If one small pause could change a situation like that, what could months or years of self-control do to an entire life? Change didn't arrive like a lightning strike. It didn't flip his life overnight. Instead, it moved slowly, almost quietly, like the tide reshaping a shoreline. Day after day, one controlled decision at a time, and little by little, his life began to stabilize. The first shift appeared in his behavior. People noticed he reacted differently now. Where frustration once appeared instantly, calmness began to take its place. Where distractions once stole his time, focus started guiding his actions. The same man, but with a different rhythm. At work, something remarkable happened. Responsibility began finding its way toward him again. Not because he demanded it, not because he forced attention, but because reliability naturally attracts trust. He became the person others could depend on in tense moments. When problems surfaced, he didn't rush into emotional reactions anymore. He paused, thought, and acted with intention. That quiet discipline began opening opportunities that once seemed impossible. Doors that had quietly closed, slowly reopened. His finances began stabilizing as well. Impulsive spending lost its grip on him. Before making decisions, he paused and asked himself a simple question. Does this serve my future? And those small choices began reshaping his stability. Even his relationships started healing, not through dramatic apologies or grand gestures, but through consistent behavior. Calm conversations replaced heated arguments. Patience replaced the reactions that once pushed people away. The man who once felt controlled by his emotions now felt something entirely different growing inside him. Confidence. Not loud or arrogant confidence, but the quiet confidence of someone who trusts his own discipline. And over time, people around him began describing him differently. Steady, reliable, respected. Yet the most powerful change wasn't what others saw. It was what he now understood about himself. That control over small moments can reshape the direction of an entire life. And that realization carried a lesson far greater than his own story. A lesson that anyone watching this journey could apply. Starting today, when people hear stories about transformation, they often imagine dramatic changes. A single breakthrough. One powerful decision that suddenly fixes everything. But real life rarely works that way. Most lasting change begins in moments so small they almost seem insignificant. Think about it for a moment. How many times in a single day do you react automatically? A frustrating message on your phone, a stressful conversation at work, the temptation to choose comfort instead of discipline. Each of those moments is a quiet crossroads. The truth is simple, but powerful. Your future is not shaped by your biggest decisions. It is shaped by the thousands of small reactions that happen every day. How you respond to stress, how you handle anger, boredom, or temptation. Most people believe success requires some complicated system, a perfect routine, a secret strategy known only by a few. But often the real turning point is much simpler than that. It begins with awareness. The moment you notice your impulse rising, that is your opportunity. The space between the impulse and the reaction. That small pause holds more power than most people realize. Inside that pause lives choice. You can practice this starting today. Next time someone frustrates you, pause before answering. Next time distraction calls your attention, take one breath and ask yourself what truly matters. Next time emotion tries to rush your decision, give yourself space to think. Those pauses slowly reshape your direction. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. Old habits don't disappear easily, but every time you choose awareness instead of reaction, you strengthen a new pattern inside your mind. And those patterns slowly become your character. This is the quiet rule that transformed that man's life. He didn't become stronger overnight. He simply learned to win control over one moment at a time. And those moments began building a completely different future. Because when a person learns to control their actions in the smallest situations, they begin to control something much greater, the direction of their entire life.